Hi everyone, so today I have this rhubarb pie recipe here to show you. This is one of my absolute favorite pies, so I figured I would share this recipe with you. So you're going to start off with a mixing bowl, a pretty large one so you can mix well, and you're going to add in 2.5 cups of flour, and this is for your pie crust. Then you're going to need a teaspoon sugar, and also a teaspoon of salt. And you're going to need 1 cup of butter, so 2 sticks, and I just cut these into chunks. I will show you here in a little bit how I do that. So I took a large knife and I just cut this into tablespoon slices. And then I cut them in half 2 ways so that I had small little squares. And I did that to both of the pieces. That's what they should look like. And then I mixed that into the flour. I just used my hands for this because this is a lot easier like that, unless you have a pastry cutter, which I need to get myself one of those. But I just used my hands and mixed that together until it gave big crumbly pieces, like this. And then I took half a cup of water and I added some ice. You want this to stay nice and cold so that the butter doesn't melt when you mix it. So I just added some of the water and then I mixed it together. In the beginning I used a spoon and later on I just used my hands again. And then you're just going to keep on adding water and mixing that in. I can't tell you exactly how much water it's going to need because it depends how dry or how humid it is that day. So I just kept adding and mixing with my hands. And I think I used basically half the cup of water for this crust. You don't want this crust dough to be too dry because otherwise you won't be able to roll it out. It will just crack. So you need it to look something like this. Then I took some flour and put that on my surface so that I could roll it out. I put part of the dough piece on top of the flour and added some more flour. I used about 2/3 of the dough for the top, or for the bottom part of the crust that's going into the pan. And I put the other piece aside. So I just kept rolling it out until it was big enough. This part takes a while, so just take your time, and you don't want this to be too thick. So I just took my pan and I put it on top. This is a 13 by 9 inch pan, and you want to make sure that there's a little bit of extra around the edges because it's going to go up the side of the pan. So I just added some flour, rubbed that in, and folded it in thirds. And that's how I put that in the pan, and I just spread it out and kind of pressed it into the sides. And then I took a pizza cutter and I just cut that excess dough off around the edges. And then I just gathered those excess pieces of dough with my other piece of dough and kneaded those together again. And then I just set that aside. And then I took my mixing bowl again and I took 6 cups of rhubarb, and I had mine frozen in the freezer. So I just kept it frozen like that. I just took it out of the freezer and put it into this bowl. And I added 1.5 cups of sugar. It sounds like a lot of sugar, but rhubarb is a little bit bitter and not very sweet, so I added 1.5 cups. And then I added 3/4 cups of flour, which you need to add flour because the rhubarb lets go of a lot of its juices, and so you wouldn't want a very runny pie. So I just added that. I could have gone with a little bit less. I guess this rhubarb wasn't as juicy as I thought it would be, so maybe a little less would have worked too. Then I just mixed those together and poured that into that crust. And you want to make sure that that flour and sugar mixture goes everywhere as evenly as possible. Otherwise, some places will be sweet and others won't. Then I just set that aside and floured my surface again and took my smaller piece of dough, and I'm going to start rolling that out for the top of the pie. And you just want to measure the same way, but this time you don't need as much room around the edges because it's just going over the top. Folding that the same way again. And putting that over the top. So like this, I just kind of pressed it into the other crust to make sure that I have enough crust and I won't cut too much off of it. And I just took my pizza cutter again and cut that little bit of excess off, and I just threw that little bit of excess crust dough away because I didn't really have any uses for that small amount of dough. And here I just took a fork and crimped that around the edges to make sure that both of the crusts were going to stick together. And if the fork just wants to stick to the dough, just dip it in some flour and then just keep going. And now I poked some holes all the way across my pie just so that the steam can go out of the crust. And I added some sugar on top of the crust as well. It was about a tablespoon or 2 of sugar. I had my oven preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and I baked that for about an hour. It will depend on your oven and everything. You just want the crust to be nice and golden brown like this. And you're gonna let that set for at least half an hour because you don't want any of the juices to run out because the flour thickens the juices as it cools down. So you want to wait about half an hour at least until you cut a slice of your pie. And that's what it should look like when you take your piece of pie out of the pan. You don't want any of the juices to run everywhere. You don't want it to be a super dry pie either, but that's how you want it to look. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and here are some of my previous videos, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!